right, welcome back. My name is Toussaint. I'll be your host again. This is Pep the Way podcast, and I'm with our special guest, Matias. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me, Toussaint. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here with you too, man. We're going to be talking about some interesting things that I think people would love to hear, right? Because there will be a lot of knowledge that we're going to learn today about kids and children mental health and how it works. And I think it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. And again, congrats on launching your podcast. I'm excited to talk lots of things mental health.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. So before we start, we always start by, spreading a word of love, like spreading light in this world that has a lot of things, right? And then there's a Bible verse in John 3:16. It says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes shall not perish but have eternal life." So the only reason I'm bringing this up is because God allowed His only Son to come. That was because He loved people, right?
That's really kind.
Love, right? Yeah. It's love. So what I'm saying is we should love each other. Love is, listen, these days we live in a very cold world.
Yeah.
People can only love you when they have something they're getting from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we should love each other, man.
Yeah.
In everything. I think love is the answer to every question that there is in this world right now.
I would agree with that statement. I think every human action should start with kindness and end with kindness.
Exactly. That's good. Right. So tell me, you were from Argentina and now you're in Halifax and your family's in Ottawa. So why did you decide to come here?
Yeah, so I actually came here because I got the job at the Children's Hospital at the IWK.
Right.
I had started my career in mental health in the adult world back in Ottawa. So I did a couple of years in the acute inpatient unit in the psychiatric emergency, and then I transferred over to the children's emergency department for mental health here in Halifax.
So you were transferred?
I switched jobs.
Oh,
I switched jobs,
right.
Yeah.
How was it, man, coming in a new city? When did you move to Halifax? Was it a long time ago?
Just before the pandemic, actually, or with the pandemic. So it was quite an experience for, to start in the city as well as a new hospital with all the adjustments and precautions, and more importantly, like the impact that atmosphere was having in kids' mental health.
Right. So did you know anybody moving here? Or you were just, I'm going to go somewhere new, start a new life?
I had some friends that I were living here quite a little while ago, but not very many people because we had kind of lost touch. So,
right.
I kind of just came here and mostly for work more than anything else.
Right. And I remember talking to you, and you were telling me how you love your job, right? Like you love your job so much, and you keep saying it. So, what made you pursue that as a career? What made you say, like, I'm gonna focus on children mental health other than any other career in the world?
Yeah, so I mean, with mental health in general, I feel like it's always been a very stigmatized demographic in general, and there are some of the people that need the most help, can be the most vulnerable, and that can use the most compassion. So that was kind of my introduction with mental health, and then with youth and children, I had gotten the experience with adults, and I had seen...
Oh, so you worked with adults too?
Yes, yeah. My original job back in Ottawa was with the adult demographic, so we did... the youngest we saw rarely would be 17 years old, but typically everything from above, and then I wanted to get the full experience of how does mental illness present through different stages of life, and what kind of treatment and expectations we can have during those situations.
So have you been in an experience where a kid or a child came in, mentally ill, and then you dealt with them, and then they left, saying that they've moved from one stage of their mindset to another one and feeling better?
Yes, it can be a hit or miss with mental health because some issues, mental health, a lot of the disorders and treatment for it tends to be long-term, so they can have kind of crises or spikes and we can treat some of it through the emergency department or set
Right.
some stuff up for the outpatient. But indefinitely, a lot of the youth in particular, right, they present with sometimes needing support, needing somebody to talk to and
Right.
to problem solve. So those, I think, are special situations to be able to be a part of.
So what courses or what classes do you have to take in college to be in children mental health?
So in our department, we work with registered nurses, which is my background, as well as with social workers as well too. So from the nursing perspective, you need in the emergency for mental health a bachelor's degree and at least 2 years of inpatient experience. And then from the social workers, you need a master's degree, and then I believe equal experience afterwards too.
Afterwards. So you have all those.
Yeah, so I did my bachelor's degree in nursing back in Ottawa, which was a 4-year course, and then I just started my job right away.
Right away. Is it good? Is the pay? The pay must be good.
Yeah, like if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life type of thing,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, I am very thankful being in a job where with job security, and like I said, I really do enjoy my job. Like I look forward going to it every day, and sometimes it's hard to
Man, yeah.
leave the work behind. But I'm quite enthusiastic and passionate about mental health and psychiatry in general, so that kind of fuels my cycle.
So what do you think is the main cause? Like what is the repetitive, cause that you face every day in children mental health?
With children's mental health, because a lot of the main psychiatric disorders don't develop until the late teens or early adult years.
So you can live with those in your childhood, and then you won't have to see anything until you reach in your 18s.
That's exactly it. So if you have a family disorder, like a genetic predisposition, sometimes we might be able to see some of that stuff in the younger years, but
Right.
generally it's within the older teen population. But for the youth and the kids, I would say that the environment makes the biggest difference. We tend to see a lot of situations of trauma, right?
Right.
So you can have a predisposition to mental health, but if you have the right environment, you can do very well. And sometimes the mental illness might actually not show up or to that extent until maybe a significant event. But if you start off with a really chaotic and maybe dysfunctional environment, you can have a lot of issues because with kids, we're still developing our brains, so we rely a lot on the people around us for to understand support, to exercise our empathy, our moral compasses, in that sense of self and how we see ourselves in the rest of the world.
Right. That's good, man. Yeah, it's really good to have you here because I'm learning a lot from what you're saying here. So I was doing a research myself, and I saw that some of the common mental health issues that kids go through are PTSD and ADHD and behavior disorders. What do you think causes that? Is it like lack of self-esteem, or is it maybe the way they were born or how they were raised? What do you think is the cause of that?
Yeah, it depends. So OCD, for example, or ADHD at that, those tend to be more neurodevelopmental disorders.
Right.
So those it was either like when you were growing inside of the womb or when you came out, so for example, you can have complications at birth, like if you're deprived from oxygen right away, or you can have issues afterwards, or a big one is the attachment with the parent figure. That's a really important stage of development for us. So, for example, if parents have mental issues and they're not able to take care of the kid, and maybe they have to go through a system of some sort, they will struggle to, or they could struggle to kind of get that sense of self and connectedness with other people.
Wow. And how do you learn? How do you teach them to cope with the world, with other kids?
That's a really tough, really tough question. So for the very young youth, we do behavioral management, which tends to work basically like modeling behavior and kind of trying to readjust some of the, whether it be emotional dysregulation or anything of that sort. Sometimes medications may be needed if it's more psychiatrically oriented, but therapy and group work tends to be a big part of the entire situation.
And then you think someone can be born with it and then grow and learn to live with it and then be able to reach their goals or to live their dream?
Oh, for sure. Yes, definitely. All mental illnesses are kind of on a spectrum. So you can have the most severes, which might need a lot of management, or you can have some that come and go or that are always there, but maybe stable at that. But a lot of people are able to live healthy, full functional lives and achieve their goals at that. Treatment wise, we typically the best outcomes, if it tends to be some of the most severe disorders, it's a combination of both medications and then therapy combined.
Oh, okay. So they have to like have go through a therapy session regularly.
Yes, yes. It's like kind of working out a muscle. So any of these types of things, especially if they involve our cognition or perception, we'll need to do different exercises or type of therapies to rewire these connections in our brain.
Right. So let me stretch it out for you a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
I told you before, I'm from Rwanda, okay? So I was born 1996. That was 2 years after the genocide.
Okay, yeah.
And then when me growing up, I grew up with kids that saw the parents murdered. Like they were killed with a machete in front of the kids, and the kids were seeing. How likely is that kid to, be born, like to grow up with a PTSD or any other type of, trauma or mental illness?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we know that trauma and specific types of trauma, especially if it's that kind of physical violence, can very much stick with you and cause an array of issues when you grow up. But a lot of it can be supported, whether it be through family or through community or through specific treatment. It is definitely difficult because we're at a very vulnerable age around that time. So you will probably struggle with significant, or you can struggle with some issues within that regard.
Yeah.
But trauma in Nova Scotia actually tends to be quite significant, especially for youth. For sure. I mean, we in some regards, like we had that mass shooting. Kids that knew those kids or just lived in that community, it creates a sense of anxiety and discomfort.
Which makes
with
sense,
that.
yeah. And then because they tend to hide it, right? Like some kids will get it and be like, you know what, I'm strong. I'm not gonna let anybody see that I'm going through these things. And then they try to hold it in, and it ends up, busting, and or it ends up destroying them mentally. That they can, they're hard to cope with. And then if they bring to you a person like that, do you know how to handle them until you get them in a line and start working again with the community?
Yeah, definitely. So we try and kind of triage like the main problems to see, okay, what's the most acute thing. Typically with somebody that has been through trauma, the physical responses tend to be quite significant because with the PTSD, you actually have relived experiences of that, whether they be images or physical sensations. So and that's the cause of your brain basically shooting an array of stress chemicals. It's like feeling like there's a bear inside of the room and you had to fight them all the time. So if they're at that point initially, like we try and do some coping skills, some exercises to help and ground them. And then if it's extreme and they can't function very well, we might be looking into medications.
Right. And then do you have to know the cause to be able to treat it, or you can just, treat it just like that?
So it depends. Some mental illnesses share a lot of commonalities in terms of symptoms, and symptom management tends to be the main thing that we tend to target during these situations. So we basically try to see, okay, how are you being affected by this? And then what is it that's affecting you with that? So if the immediate aspect is, for example, your physical response, that'll be the main thing. When it comes to specific disorders, that can be a little trickier because, for example, you can have people that are very sad and have recurrent sadness that may not necessarily be depressed and may not benefit from medications.
I was actually going to ask you about this one, the behavior disorder.
Yes.
How does that one work? Because it was my first time, hearing about it.
Definitely, yeah. So behavioral disorders are the most common with children because they're still kind of developing their brain, and they tend to externalize a lot of their behaviors, which is basically either through sometimes self-harm or aggression or destruction of property and stuff like that. Wow. But it basically, especially if it comes from some sort of trauma or attachment disorder, it comes from a place of frustration, right? And just they're looking to get their needs met, and they haven't been shown the ability to learn how to do that in those cases.
And you have seminars where you'll go and find kids at school and teach them about these things, or do they you only work with people that comes at the hospital for treatment?
Our unit specifically works within the emergency department, but all of kids' mental health works within a specific mental health system. So we have, for example, therapists that are working in the schools that see kids individually and would be doing that sort of thing as well.
That's cool. That's cool. Right, because it was good to have you here, because I remember when we were together and I talked to you about having you on podcast, and you're quick to respond, and then this week I kind of texted you on the last minute and I'm like, can you please come in and tell us about the mental health? And you're like, yeah, that's good, I should come in. So I thank you for that.
Of course, yeah, and thank
you for being here, and you giving us a lot of wisdom, and you opening us up to things that we didn't know about. Right, because I have a little niece that I love so much, man, and I would hate for her to go through things like that, right? So what do you think is the ways to protect the kids from going through those experiences?
I think acceptance and understanding are the biggest key factors, right? Like we mentioned earlier, I think it never hurts to be kind to begin with, and that should be the basic. But a lot of the times kids are confused by the stuff that's going on, and I think sometimes they may bring in and they're like, oh, this is this angry kid, yada yada, and then you get to talk to them and you can understand why they're angry, why they're upset, and instead of dealing with the anger, you can deal with the underlying emotions.
It's funny because the same thing can happen in grown-up people too, right? Yeah. Like you'll see somebody and see like, this guy is really rude, and then when you get to talk to them and know them, and you find out the reason they are doing what they're doing, maybe it's the experiences they've been through. Maybe we were talking earlier about the people that were in army forces and they turned their life around and started a new community. It can be hard for some people to move on from that life, right? So imagine seeing a person like that hasn't accepted that he has to live a different life. You can be on hunt, like it's kill or be killed for 10-15 years, so it's really hard to bring that person, put in a community, right?
Yeah, definitely. And those are some of the most like you say, like if anger is really just a defense of us trying to protect ourselves, and especially when you've been in situations where you always feel like you have to survive, that is your sympathetic nervous system basically being like, we have to fight, this is not a good situation.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially with people from Ukraine and the things they're going through. It can be hard. Too. I appreciate having you here, okay, and thank you for accepting my invitation. And it was a good conversation.
Thank you very much for having me, and congratulations again on launching your podcast. I think you're doing great things here, my friend.
All right, thank you, man, and I appreciate your love. Thank you very much.
All the best, my friend.
All right, man.